Hussein, who herself is an FGM survivor who has joined us. She's traveled all the way from Tana River. Good morning, Sadia. Welcome. And we'll also be joined shortly by Michelle Koinange. Michelle is the Kenya coordinator of Stop the Traffic. This is an organization that focuses a lot on helping to prevent the trafficking of people and especially children. We are also linking up via Zoom with Benedict Omilo, who is a program officer for the Eastern Africa Child Rights Network. And again, they too are concerned with the plight of children, not just in Kenya, but in Ethiopia and in Uganda as well. Maybe let me start with you, Sadia, and thank you very much for making that journey to get us to get to the studio. FGM is still a big issue at the moment. What is your experience of FGM?
Good morning. My name is Sadia Hussein, and I'm from Tana River County and an FGM champion. I'm a survivor of FGM, and it happened to me when I was 10 years old. And the pain I went through is still fresh in my mind. I can still remember what happened. And if I recall and what happened, there was one good morning that I was taken to the bush, and I was cut. And to be very honest, and before you even go through the cut, you will be willing to do so. You will be excited so much because your fellow peers will mock you for not being cut. So you can't play with them, and it's really traumatizing. So once you are being told that you are going to go through the cut, then you feel that you will also be complete and feel normal. So I was so much excited. But again, where the deception lies is that no one prepares you for the pain. No one tells you that there is a razor blade involved, there is a cut, there will be blood. No one prepares you for that. So I thought it's something that will make you clean, because they will tell you you will be clean, you will be complete, all these things. So I was also excited. But the sad reality was there are women who were holding me to the ground. So others were pressing my chest, others were holding my hands, others my legs. So, and I felt a sharp cut between my legs. And I wanted to scream loud and cry so that at least someone can come and save me, because I was not prepared for that. I was not waiting for that. What I expected was not what was happening at that moment. So, but unfortunately, I couldn't scream because there was a piece of cloth that was put in my mouth. And
so quite a lot of people who are involved in this.
Yeah, of course. There is the cutter. The cutter was actually my grandmother, and she passed on, so may God forgive her. And there is a woman who is always near the cutter, directing, like there is still a place you have not cut and something like that. There is also those who will be holding your hands. There is this woman who will concentrate with putting the cloth into your mouth so that you don't shout or scream.
And you're 10 years old at this point.
Just imagine. And all those women now holding me tightly, others pressing my chest to the ground so that I don't move. Because if you move, they can cut or tamper with another tissue, and it will be another problem altogether. So they will hold you tightly so that at least the procedure can be performed. And what happens is that at that time, there is no anesthesia, painkillers or something. So it's just...
So how long did you stay in that kind of pain? How long did it take before the pain went away?
Oh, what happens is that, in fact, it's even less painful when you are being cut. The pain itself, the real pain, starts after 2 hours. Like when you are now left alone, the only person you can see is actually your own mother, because after the cut, you have to stand up. They will hold you, and you stand up straight. They start. They of course, after the procedure, I can't see what was happening, but that's what happened. They sew you up so that you can, when you are healing, you can completely stitch together.
Right.
So when you are upright, Now they start tying you from the waist to the toes. Even when you want to, for example, help yourself urinating or something like that. Like
how many days did it take you to kind of recover, at least even from the pain?
2 months.
2 months.
Yeah.
And that's a pain that you carry up to now.
Yeah, I still remember, and whenever I remember, I start regretting. Maybe if someone told me there is a pain involved, maybe someone told me the procedure is not something easy, I could have made a choice and say, no, I don't want to go through it.
And now, unfortunately, this is a practice that still continues.
Yeah, exactly.
At this moment.
Yeah.
Why does the community, I know you come from the Somali community in Tana River, why they and other communities in Kenya, why do they still continue with the practice?
Unfortunately, let me just give you a brief scenario of what really happens. In Kenya, we have the national prevalence of FGM at 21%. But however, we have now the prevalence varying across communities and counties. We have 22 hotspot counties in Kenya, which among is my county, Tana River. So in my own community, the prevalence is 94%. So you can imagine 9 out of 10 girls have already gone through FGM. So this tells you a lot that this is something, it's a procedure or a practice that the community really values and is more attached to.
And are still holding on to.
And yeah, so basically if I just tell you why they're still practicing, they feel that this is a practice that makes you clean, it promotes hygiene, and they feel it curbs the sexual urge of a woman because they want you to be faithful to your husband in the future, and also a way of preserving your virginity. And because they believe if a woman is not cut, then she will be promiscuous. So no one wants to to bring shame to the family, so they have to make sure that their daughter goes through it. So another issue is that in my community, they believe FGM is a religious requirement, but unfortunately it's not. That's why, and even now, despite all the efforts in the president's commitment, still FGM is being practiced. And some of the reasons is why I had to write this book. That and still people are holding on to FGM while we are we are now shifting from the traditional houses, living in iron-roofed houses, but we still want to continue harming girls and say it's culture.
I know, Sadia, you've become an advocate against the practice of FGM. What kind of response do you get from the community, which is still holding on to something that you are fighting?
There is a lot of rejection and resistance within the community, especially the men. Because this is something they believe, it's like you want to give girls some sort of freedom to their body, which is not in their mind. So what they want is that these girls still to be submissive, to be faithful, because they believe if a woman is not cut, she will be promiscuous. So you can imagine, right now in the practicing communities, not only in my community, the practice is still happening because they believe like you are betraying them. They believe you want to bring Western culture. And I always tell them, like, if I want to defend my body, I want to defend the body of my daughter, to have a consent to it or make it a choice. You are telling me I'm bringing the Western culture. What about you wearing a shirt and a trouser? Was it our culture? No, it's not. So why do you want to do yours the way you want? But you want to dictate on how my body should be.
And now we are just 2 years away from the target of total eradication of FGM by 2022. It doesn't look like we're going to meet our target given what is going on already in our society.
These are the kind of reasons I had to write the book, The Hidden Scars of Female Genital Mutilation. And one thing I will tell you, it's always good to have a target. and I welcome the President's commitment to end FGM by 2022. It will really help us to actually reflect on why we were not able to end FGM all these years, and it has been happening. Why are we not able to end? Because, for instance, when you want to explain about female genital mutilation, no one understands you. Because the way I'm dressed, if today I go and walk, nobody feels that I'm in pain because I'm looking smart and good.
So they think you're okay?
People think you are okay, but they don't know what are the issues you are enduring in silence. What are these pain you are still remembering? So this is what I always say. Like, if what was cut was visible on the face, I'm very sure everyone would be running and making FGM a priority, ending FGM a priority. And it would now be like the 200 million worldwide means survivors walking with the complications, lifetime complications of female genital mutilation. If today those 200 million women were walking without their lips or noses, what would happen? Today it would be an international crisis or disaster.
What about, would you say there are some steps that have at least, some progress that's still being seen as we speak?
Yeah, of course. And to start with myself, I have 2 FGM-free villages. I've also saved a lot of girls from FGM.
In Tanariva?
Yeah, exactly. So, and I have myself 3 daughters who will never go through FGM. And that's actually, when I gave birth to my first daughter, is when I realized FGM is not something that the pain goes over once you are cut. It's something that follows you for the rest of your life. So when I was cut, I thought it was over. When I was married again, I thought maybe it was another reopening and it's over. But when I was giving birth, I said, no, it's still following me. So I had to now stand and defend the rights of my own daughter.
And so you've written this book here, which is the hidden scars of genital mutilation. What are you saying in the book? I know I'll get to read it, but for those who may not yet you're launching this book today.
Yeah.
What are you saying in the book in summary?
In summary, this book, the title itself speaks a lot of words. The hidden scars of female genital mutilation. FGM is never a priority simply because it's done to a hidden genitalia. It's not visible for others to sympathize with the victims. You get it? So, the hidden scars of female genital mutilation enlightens people to understand what are the underlying issues of female genital mutilation, what are we living with, what are these scars I'm talking about. So it will give you a clear understanding of why we must end FGM, and it should not be left to the president or the anti-FGM board, but it should be a collective responsibility, everyone. Okay. And we have another heading of the cultural struggle of the girl. And apart from female genital mutilation, there are also other cultures that undermine the rights of women and girls.
Just let me put you on hold there, just on those other things that affect children. I believe now we can connect with you. Michelle, good morning and welcome to Your World.
Good morning, how are you?
Very well. I can hear you faintly, but if you can hear me, we've obviously...
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, lovely. Okay. So now, Michelle, FGM is just one form of violence against women and especially children. You're involved in, in countering trafficking. What's your experience on that?
Okay, my experience is, let me first give an overview of my work. So, as you rightfully mentioned, I'm the coordinator of Stop the Traffic, which is a network member-based organization that brings together civil society organizations, individuals, and private sector who work in the fight against human trafficking. So a lot of our members do have, they offer services that go towards helping victims of human trafficking, that is adults as well as children. So as today being the International Day in support of victims of torture, I believe child victims of human trafficking are a big group that is greatly overlooked, because as Sadia has mentioned, a lot of our communities are not aware of what child trafficking is, how it presents itself. So it's a crime that continues to happen, but we tend to look at it as not a local problem, and even further, not a problem that affects children.
So, what's the status of child trafficking in Kenya, would you say? What's the state of it?
So currently, according to the Global Slavery Index, the data they collected last year puts it as 328,000 Kenyans are living in situations considered as modern slavery. 1 in 6 of those is a child. So that is a really, really high number of children who are going through child trafficking or child sexual exploitation.
What form does it take? I know trafficking is wide. It's quite wide.
Yes, it is. It is quite wide, and I think that's the problem. People will tend to associate the word trafficking with what happens in Saudi or what happens in the Middle East, but then in what they don't know is situations such as early child marriage is a form of human trafficking. Child begging, because we see a lot of children in the streets begging. That is a form of trafficking. We don't know where the children come from, who has brought them to the streets. Sometimes, I know it's been covered a lot, but there's also child labor. For example, in Kenya, at the Kiamaiko slaughterhouse, there was an expose that revealed that there are a lot of children who are actually brought into the slaughterhouses and end up working there. And a child's place is in a classroom, not working in a slaughterhouse, for example. So there are multiple forms of SI.
And are we making progress as a nation?
Yes, we are. In the last decade, we have made a lot of progress. Yes, there's still a lot to be done, but I think we need to applaud the government in some of the strides they have taken. For example, we had the launch of the Counter Trafficking in Persons Act in the year 2010. We've had the launch of 2 DCI departments that deal with trafficking. So we have the Anti-Human Trafficking Child Protection Unit that specifically deals with matters child trafficking. Then we have the Transnational Organized Crime Unit, which is dedicated to a lot of multiple transnational organized crime, but human trafficking is part of it. So adult victim cases are actually handled by that department. We have the cybersecurity center, which was also launched in an attempt to fight, or rather to provide assistance in the fight against online child sexual exploitation as well as child trafficking. So we do have a lot of strength. Yeah.
And what would you say are the challenges in trying to address this issue?
First, I think the lack of awareness, because as I've mentioned, a lot of people look at human trafficking as a problem that is outside of our scope. So people will look at cases of, as I mentioned, Middle East, people who have been taken to Middle East to get jobs. So people rarely look at it in our context. So, for example, in Kenya, according to data we collected last year, we realized that domestic trafficking is actually higher. The data proves that domestic trafficking rates are higher than international trafficking. So we can first start by understanding the scope of it, by seeing our role in it as a community. As Sadia has said, it's our collective responsibility to first understand what this is, and then also be the solution bearers. For example, if you see, sorry?
When you say domestic trafficking, what do you actually mean?
Domestic trafficking, let me give an example. When people bring in relatives from the villages to Nairobi or to their homes, wherever that may be, and then make them work as domestic workers or become the nannies in their households, that is a form of human trafficking. When people sadly, in some communities, some girls are taken back to the rural homes and then either go through FGM or are forced into an early marriage. So those are some examples of domestic trafficking. There's also child labor, where young children end up working in tea farms, in slaughterhouses. So there are forms of it. Another example would be begging as well. Some people are brought in from rural areas to urban centers and then start begging. So yeah.
Okay, Michelle, now back to you, Sadia. The communities that you work with and where you're trying to raise awareness and combat this practice, do they realize that this is an outlawed practice, that you can get into trouble for doing that? Do they acknowledge that? For FGM, that is.
Okay, the community still feels that FGM is something to be proud of, and they don't feel it's an outlawed practice. For them, it has never been an outdated thing. It's still happening. So when it comes to the issues or underlying issues, when it comes to ending FGM, it's always good to get what are these values attached to FGM. You need to understand, and I always say, in every community, there is a specific reason why they practice FGM. When in my community, they practice it for the, religious issues, for the cleanliness, to promote hygiene, that is. And then there is another community that is practicing as an alternative, as a rite of passage, I mean. So for such communities, maybe you have to introduce the alternative rites of passage and something like that. But for my community, you need to engage the religious leaders for them to understand that this is not promoted within the religion. Why am I saying that? And understanding FGM has been the biggest problem across the world. The reason being, majority of the survivors are silent. They don't feel this is something wrong that happened to them. Because if my mother felt that it was wrong, then I wouldn't have gone through it. But now that I understood that it's wrong, it's not happening to my daughter. What if all the survivors felt it was wrong, that it happened to them and it should not pass to their daughters? And like, let's say majority of them are silent about it. So you as a person, how will you end FGM when I, the victim or survivor, feels that it's okay for me to endure all this pain? It has been normalized. FGM is something that has been normalized within the community, that even when a woman dies when giving birth, they still feel her day reached and it's okay for her to die. So when even death has been normalized, what do you think about the other complications? They feel it's something that we should.
So you mentioned religious leaders. Who else should be targeted in this to join, the campaign? Is it the men? Is it the older women? Who do you think are the people who hold the power, who can actually help transform the society?
For me, I will always tell you, and I've written in the book, I will always tell you, it's not that we need to engage specific people. This, for us to end FGM, there is no single approach that will end FGM. It should be a collective thing. And one biggest thing that I would always say, it's also empowering. We start with empowering the women themselves. Why am I saying that? If these women are enduring all these sufferings, all these tortures, just because they want to be faithful to their husbands, just because they want to be accepted in the community, what do you think? For me, I always ask, who is controlling this man when you want to control the woman? Who? That is the question we should be asking ourselves. And women should understand, why are we always there to make ourselves accepted by these men when there is no one like measuring this man's virginity or even controlling his behaviors? Why is it that we always want to like make the woman down and press her? When it comes to the issues of now, the specific approaches I'm talking about, it should be a collective thing.
Okay.
Like engaging the young boys, because they are the ones who will marry these girls, if not cut. Engaging the girls themselves to understand that this is their body and they have a right to it. the survivors themselves, so that they can protect their daughters, the religious leaders, because it's done for as a religious requirement, the government, the law enforcers, so that at least when it happens, they can also arrest the perpetrators, the education sector, because FGM really affects the education system, the health sector, health, because it's a health issue. So to cut the long story short, it should be a collective thing.
Okay. Michelle, let me come back to you. And what kind of stories do you hear from people who've undergone different forms of, children especially, undergone different forms of trafficking or even violence for that matter?
Some of the stories are okay. Could I give? Okay, let me give some multiple examples. So we've had stories where they share that it's, as Sadi is mentioning, it's something that is ingrained in their culture. So they'll explain that it was expected of them to be a bride at an early age. Some of them will talk about how their parents didn't have enough money for school or money to provide for the home. So either the parents put them to work, sadly, or other times the child feels like they need to take up the responsibility regardless of their age, and then start earning an income. So that sometimes means getting odd jobs after school, or quitting school altogether to try and get an income. A lot of times, sadly, the children are trafficked by people who are close to them. So someone was promised schooling in Nairobi, and then the relative brings the child to Nairobi, and instead of taking them to school, they end up using them as their nanny, or using them as their gardener or something like that. So there are varied stories when it comes to victims of child trafficking.
And in terms of solutions, like Sadia saying, yes, you know, a multi-faceted approach would work. From your point of view, what needs? How does this need to be addressed?
I think it needs, I'll echo what she says, and it's, yes, we do need a multifaceted approach, and we also need more collaboration amongst civil society organizations, governments. We need a more collaborative and cooperative approach towards finding solutions, instead of all going at it from our own separate corners. So, for example, with human child trafficking, we need improved psychosocial support, because that, for such a traumatic experience, it's sad that we don't have adequate psychosocial support that is given to victims after. We need shelters, we need facilities that these children can stay in as we try and find their families, or find a permanent home for them. They need support in going back to school. They need, so as in, we need to have this conversation as a group of multiple stakeholders who are looking at this child as a whole human being who needs to be given support in multiple ways. If we have the conversation as just civil society organizations, we only see the child in one area. If it's just let's say the education sector having this conversation, they see a child who needs to go back to school, but have we addressed the psychosocial needs? We need to have a holistic conversation about these solutions.
So Michelle, we've been reporting a lot in this season about the increasing numbers of teenage pregnancies. I wonder whether COVID-19 has had an impact also in terms of trafficking.
Yes and no. So that, sadly, a lot of people are now staying with the traffickers. So and like in normal situations, we'd have probably had a rescue or someone like an intervention or an interception to rescue them. Right now, a lot of the moving has been kind of stopped. So people are either staying with the traffickers, or the routes that they used before have now changed. So at the moment, I can't give a clear data-backed answer to it, but I'm sure with time we can be able to generate the data that compares the rate of child trafficking before and during and as well as after COVID-19.
Okay. Now, Sadia, for you, in terms of your own experience, where did you find healing in terms of your own internal healing? Where did that come from for your soul and for your mind?
Okay, one thing that really helped me is about speaking my story throughout. Because when I initially started sharing my story, I remember the first day I started talking about what I went through. I was unable to even communicate because the sound was stuck in my throat. I couldn't even speak for myself. And I used to cry, like continuously cry, until now I can be able to share my story at least and at some point without crying. So, and as Michelle said, the psychosocial support should be there for survivors and the victims. There are girls who go through FGM, and when arrest is being done, they are the exhibits. So they are carried alongside their parents as exhibit. So what are they going through? You can imagine. You have already gone through the process I explained to you. Now you are being taken as an exhibit, and you are already enduring a lot of suffering. So we really need to do the psychosocial support. And one thing that you ask me about what else we can do for us to end FGM, there is one big, very stakeholder who can do a mass campaign when it comes to ending FGM, and that's the media. I can reach, like for example, if I want to reach my village, I can reach a maximum of 1,000 people, for instance, if I'm to do an outreach. But for a media, you can reach as many people as 1 million people at once. So why can't also the media make like ending FGM, they're also personal commitment and responsibility, so that at least the society gets the right messages. We also have a challenge of conveying the wrong messages when it comes to ending FGM. What the community is doing is what most of the time we rubber stamp, and that's actually what they wanted. So how can we convey the right messages so that at least they can understand?
And when communities argue, this is our culture, government has no business interfering with our own beliefs, with our own culture, with what we believe in, that's a challenge.
And I have started saying, you know, when we are talking about culture, can we define culture? For example, the way I'm dressed, anyone can tell this is a Muslim lady without even saying my community, right? So culture should be something that gives you identity. Like when you see this person, you know this is a Maasai because of the way they are dressed. That's culture. When you see a Manyata in my community, you can tell this is a Somali house, traditional house, this is a Maasai, this is a Pokot, this, you can easily tell, right? So let's come back to FGM. How can you tell who is cut and who is not cut unless I confess? So how is it giving them identity? How? So when we want to say like harming girls is a violation of their rights, FGM is number one illegal in Kenya. Number two, according to the World Health Organization, it's a violation against women and girls' rights. Now let me come to the right to my body, my own body. How can harming my body be a community pride? It's never there. So, and at the end of the day, I will endure the pain and sufferings alone, and the community is not even aware of what I'm going through. And FGM affects every individual in separate way, in a unique way. My story is not the story of another survivor. If you compare, for instance, there is type 1, type 2, type 3 of FGM. Maybe the type 1 has less effects compared to type 2 FGM. So again, there is someone who went through type 3 of FGM, but didn't have maybe complications. So, and I always say FGM is like an accident. You can go through an accident, be safe without injuries. Sometimes you sustain minor or major injuries, and sometimes you even die at the scene or later at the hospital. Exactly that's what happens when it comes to FGM. Only that we have normalized including death.
Okay. Now, Michelle, some people might struggle with the notion that when you have a house help in your house who's below the the age of an adult, that is actually wrong or even maybe illegal.
I think maybe it's as I think as Sadia has said, in her community, FGM has been considered or normal, yet it's not a normal practice. It's not even supported in her religion. So the same thing. I think it's happened for so many years that a household will probably say, in the household I grew up in, we employed people of a certain age. We brought in relatives of who needed assistance and allowed them to be domestic workers or become our gardeners or whatever the case may be. So I believe it starts by us holding our community accountable. So if you see your neighbor has taken in a young child to work for them, will you point it out to them or just have a conversation with them about it? I know it sounds very utopian or it's not what we'd expect in a normal situation, but then we need to be more alert to the environment we're living in. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. We can now link with Benedict Omilo. Now, welcome, Ben, and from your own experience, we are looking at this day that's helping us to remember victims of torture around the world. What is your experience as an organization in terms of violence against children?
Okay, thank you very much for having me here. Firstly, I want to appreciate my colleagues in studio, Michelle and Sadia, for the work they are doing. I'm Ben Omilo from the East African Child Rights Network. We are a coalition of 9 national coalitions. We are a network of 9 national coalitions in the region of Eastern Africa. And we work with the National Child Rights Coalition across the region. The UN defined Eastern Africa from Madagascar to Uganda to Somaliland to Ethiopia. Now, in this case, we work with many vulnerable children, and currently we are being supported by Tere Dioms on a project called Development and Integration of Regional Efforts Against Trafficking and Commercial Sexual Exploitation in Africa. So this is a program that has been there for close to a year, and it has enabled us to interact with many child rights actors.
And so
also
Ben, if I can come in, what happens to these children? What are their stories, the children that you deal with?
There are many stories emanating from the children that we deal with, and especially we directly deal with the child rights actors. We capacity build, capacitate them, and there's a lot of when we talk of trafficking, from this project targets like 3 countries of Eastern Africa, that is Uganda, Kenya, and Ethiopia. There's a lot of trafficking in these routes, and my colleague Michelle alluded to it, also as a destination, especially at the border points. And these children are being trafficked for various reasons. Others are trafficked and end up being involved or being taken for female genital mutilation. Across the borders of Uganda and Kenya, you will find that there are children who are being trafficked to Kenya for just to come and be performed FGM, and they cross back. Our borders are porous. Same to others are come and they're being trafficked, and they end up on streets as beggars. Others are trafficked and they end up doing some domestic job, and they are violated. And remember, today as we celebrate or we observe the day against torture. So you find that these are all forms of violations that children end in, starting with also sexual exploitation. So there's a lot, array of stories about children being exploited and violated as a result of trafficking.
Ben, so who is doing all this? Who's doing all the trafficking and all the violations?
Now, one, you'll find that trafficking starts at the lower level to the higher levels. We have trafficking being done within the communities by even relatives, even guardians, even some of these say groupings or children homes. You have heard of these stories. So you find that children, we have the perpetrators come in different forms, as family members, as relatives, as some of them they camouflage as child rights actors. So it requires a lot of approach or multifaceted approach by the governments and child rights actors like the CS organizations and international development partners to ensure that you identify who is in the child rights sector rightly, and who is there to exploit or to exploit children.
So with all these efforts, Ben, why is it so difficult to bring this practice under control or completely abolish it?
There are efforts. As I said, we are a regional organization, and of course there are efforts, there are laws, there are charters, starting with the UN CRC, that is the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. And all countries, most countries, 47 countries out of around 52 African countries have already committed to this charter, and most East African countries have done the same, including our Kenya country. And you find that they have mainstreamed or domesticated these charters in our constitutions and policies and legislation, pieces of legislations at sub-regional level and at national level. So okay. the governments are working, are trying their best. The CSOs, as ourselves, we are also doing our best to firstly do a lot of sensitization and awareness and the capacity building. And actually that bit is lacking, especially at grassroots level. You find that a lot of trafficking and violations is happening across our rural borders, and even our informal settlements in towns and cities. Okay. You see that there's less capacity building and awareness creation, especially amongst those communities.
Okay, Sadia, let me come to you now. When will you know that your work is done, that you've accomplished your goal?
Come on again.
When will you know that your work has been done, that your goal has been accomplished?
Okay, the day every woman and girl will have her own voice and say, yes, I have a right to my body. Because it's not only about ending FGM, it's about empowering women and girls. Because if, for instance, we end FGM by 2022, what next? And girls are still going through a lot of issues, a lot of violences. And there is rape and defilement. There is the issue of teenage pregnancies, rampant. There is the issue of child trafficking, you have heard. There are a lot of issues the girl child is going through. So what next after ending FGM? That's all my book talk about, and the cultural struggle of the girl child. The day I will say, yes, I have achieved, is the day I will have an FGM-free world, and also a woman or girl can have her own voice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, for you, Michelle, 2022, total elimination of FGM, is that really possible?
I'm hopeful. I'm going to stick with, I'm hopeful. Yes, I'll just stick at it.
Okay, you're hopeful.
If we put in the work, you put in the effort, yeah.
Right. Okay. And
I don't want to say it's not realistic, but because it's something that the president has actually put forward, and it's a goal that he has. So I'll just say I'm hopeful, and if people like Sadia at the front lines, I'm sure that it's possible.
Okay. And Ben, to you, we are at the end of our program, but a quick final word in a few seconds from you.
Thank you. I want to firstly appreciate what the media is doing in this bringing to limelight what is happening, especially around trafficking of children and trafficking in persons, and what the CSOs are doing. However, I will want to call upon our governments to fast track on the implementation of full implementation of the regional conventions and charters on child rights, and also enhancing capacities of the local, of the grassroots child rights officers or children officers at grassroots level, and especially at our border points, so that there is a... Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ben. And you're very briefly, Sadia, there are women watching this, other people watching this in Tanariva and other places. What would you like to say to them, very briefly?
Okay, I really want to appreciate NTV for hosting me today, because I know media really plays a very big role towards ending FGM and promoting girl child rights. And my clarion call to all stakeholders is that let us come out of our comfort zones. Girls and women are suffering in silence. They need a voice. They are silent not because they are okay, but because they have been taught that's a normal thing to do. I call upon the survivors, the survivors of FGM. It's not the end. Don't worry about the stigma. Build your confidence and share your story.
Sadia, thank you. Michelle, thank you. And Ben as well for joining us on this day that observes people who've undergone torture, International Day, the 26th of June. That's it for the moment, and Your World Proper will be back on Monday, starting with a workout session at 6:30 in the morning, and then Gladys Gachanja will be right here with a conversation for that day. So until then, have a good weekend and keep safe.